Hi, this is DJ James from musicmoose.org. We're back with some funk guitar and an introduction to how to play some funk rhythm guitar and to really hone up those chops when you might be backing up James Brown or something like that. What I want to do with this lesson is introduce you to a concept that is really big in terms of gussying up some of your licks, and that is the chromatic approach. You may have noticed in the last lesson, for those of you who took a look at the introduction to funk guitar, a lot of the things that I was doing were based on chromatic slides. Now, technically, or if we want to nitpick, there are three chords happening there. We start off with a B9, sliding into a C9, and then up to a C sharp 9, and then back to the C9. But overall what's happening is there's really just a C. And if we think of that B9 and the C sharp 9, they're really just chromatic approaches, or actually we might theoretically call that a D flat 9, but we'll get into theory and why we might call that some other things in my other series of lessons. So if you haven't taken a look at the theory lessons, take a look over there. Either way, that chromatic approach is something that really highlights a lot of funk guitar, especially sliding in like that. One thing that we have in terms of funk guitar is also the single note chromatic approach, which is incredibly important and which really sort of fills out the sound. If I'll play just a very quick example of what I mean by that. Essentially what I was doing was, first of all, outlining a bass note, and then kind of creating a C7 sound by playing this chord, the middle of a C minor 7, and hammering on to the E natural. So what essentially we have is a chromatic approach in the inner voice, going from D sharp or E flat to E. So the chord goes from a C minor to a C7. And like the chromatic approaches that we had down here, going from B9 to C9, instead this is just a single inner voice. So even though we do have technically a C minor chord happening there, what you're really hearing is just a dominant chord and a chromatic approach in that inner voice. And what I mean by chromatic approach is taking a note that's not part of that chord, not part of the key, which in this case would be E flat, and using it as an approach note to a note that is part of the chord, in this case, E natural. Now, one of the things that we could do then, once we kind of use that chromatic approach inside, is create entire riffs out of that. And what I want to play for you right now is just a very quick example of a song that I played with a band that I wrote a long time ago. And I'll play the riff of this tune for you, and it'll give you a very quick idea of how we might use this to create a really funky, a really solid bluesy sounding riff. So what we have in that riff, if you take a look at it, and back when I played this, when I wrote the tune, the idea was that that would be the lead guitar riff. And then the rhythm guitar would essentially just stay on a B flat that entire time. So while the lead guitar would be playing the tonality is simply a B flat 7 or a B flat 9. Right through that entire thing. So what we have is, first of all, the chromatic approach in that inner voice. That creates a little bit of a melodic riff inside of that chord. And then a single note walk down, which really isn't that important for what we're talking about now. And back to that riff. And the entire time, the tonality that's working there is B flat. But that chromatic approach and what I'm essentially thinking of as neighboring chords or neighboring double stops, which lead back down to the B flat, means that it's just B flat that's drilling in our ears the entire time. So again, the rhythm guitar, B flat through that entire time, and the lead guitar playing something like. And we can do that, again, within any type of funk progression. And as I did in the last lesson, what I want to do now is quickly play through a blues progression in C, showing you how we can add that in as yet another technique in our funk guitar arsenal. Okay, so essentially, hopefully you heard the chromatic approach that was happening there and heard some of the things that we can do playing a simple blues progression as the guitarist that's grinding out some sort of funk, grinding out some sort of rhythm, grinding out a riff that happens behind a soloist, happens behind the rest of the band. Next time, when we're dealing with some funk guitar, what I really want to get into is expanding your chops when it comes to throwing in those fills, throwing in bass lines, and filling out the bottom of the chord, even when we're playing some small voicings up top. So for musicmoose.org, this is DJ James.